Welcome back to another episode of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast, powered by ISOFIT, Oro Muscles, and Firefly Recovery. ISOFIT is my go-to for all things isometric strength training. For more on ISOFIT, be sure to check out isofit.com. Oro Muscles revolutionizes rehabilitation with real-time actionable insights into muscle activity with live biofeedback and instant analysis, which has made a huge impact in my work with athletes. For more on Oro, be sure to check out oromuscles.com. Episodes like this are made possible by Firefly, the official recovery provider of the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast. For more on Firefly, be sure to check out recoveryfirefly.com. Joining me today on the Braun Performance and Rehab Podcast is Adam Moreau from FlexPro Grip. Adam and I have an amazing conversation about the elbow and athletes and elbow injuries and all of the incredible work that him and his team at FlexPro Grip have been up to. This is a really great chat, and I really appreciate Adam's time and all the amazing work that he's doing. And I also really appreciate our mutual friend, Matt Tomets, for getting us connected. Enjoy. Adam, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to work with you today, man. For people who might not be familiar with you or all the incredible stuff that you and your team at FlexPro have been doing lately, especially in the baseball space, would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are, what the company is, and all the great things that you do?
Well, I appreciate that. I'll do my best to turn this into an elevator pitch because I could probably take this runway and just tell the complete FlexPro Grip story for the next 45 minutes or so. I'll do my best not to do that. Please stop me if that's what it turns into. But yes, I'm Adam Moreau. I'm co-founder and president of FlexPro Grip. I'm not a doctor, but we like to say we stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night, and that's kind of how we ended up where we are. Much like you guys with ISOFIT, we operate in the world of isometrics. We developed this, I think, is a really cool device and training aid that can be used in the rehab space, performance, and injury prevention. We got our start specifically in baseball, but really it goes well beyond the sport. I know I haven't talked about FlexPro Grip specifically and what it is yet, but people can kind of connect the dots here, and then I'm teasing it and I'll get into it. But we primarily are for elbow injuries, forearm injuries, and what's going on with the wrist, hand, fingers. So we got our start with UCL injuries or Tommy John in baseball. We can also use it to treat lateral epicondylitis or tennis elbow, medial epicondylitis being golfer's elbow, and even going beyond kind of the traditional sports world and thinking about carpal tunnel syndrome, using it in stroke rehab, or helping individuals regain finger or hand muscle function pretty much of the lower arm. I know I buried the lead a little bit on what FlexPro Grip actually is. So FlexPro Grip is pretty much like a super teched out hand grip dynamometer or force plates for your fingers and wrist. It is kind of a Iron Man, Edward Scissorhands-esque device that has a load cell capable of reading force for each individual finger in both flexion and extension, as well as for radial and ulnar deviation. And then coming down the line, we're working on it now, fingers crossed. We can have this sometime in 2025, but working in pronation and supination as well. And all of this device pairs with a mobile app that you can use on iOS devices, so phone, iPad, or Mac as well, that tracks all of your testing as well as your training. So we are using FlexPro Grip not just in the testing or assessment space, but also to assist in athletes or everyday athletes regaining their health or performing better.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely incredible. And it's interesting because the one thing I thought you were going to bring up, I thought you were going to bring up your podcast, Adam. Don't you host a podcast too?
I do. Yeah, yeah. So I guess I'm much like you, a little bit of a podcast host. And I would be remiss not to mention I'm actually a double podcast host. One is with a buddy, just having some fun, trying to learn more about what people do to become successful. That's called T-Work Podcast. It's a little play on words. We were baseball teammates and roommates in college. So T-Work, just kind of like doing the little things that help you be successful, but also I don't want to call myself a tea aficionado, but I'm not as much a coffee guy, way more a tea guy. And I'm slamming that stuff all the time. I already finished my glass of tea this morning. Otherwise, I would have shown you. I just have an empty mason jar next to me, though. But then I have the Layback Podcast, which is more of a niche baseball elbow injury podcast where we talk to different people in the industry, whether it's players, parents, coaches, trainers, doctors, surgeons, whoever, about what is going on in the world of elbows and baseball.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. I mean, few things that you brought, well, a lot of things that you brought up there, and I'm going to try and run it all back and kind of recap it there. First off, I mean, I love your concept of being obsessed with tea. It's so funny. I never know what people are going to bring up when I'm talking with them. We had like a 10-minute conversation with one girl about cheese and how she loved cheese and this type of cheese and stuff. And it's funny. So I guess I got to ask now, like, are you a green tea guy, or are we a
Green
British
tea.
tea guy, or like lavender or chamomile? Like, what exactly goes into like a good tea here?
Yeah, I'm pretty basic. I have leveled up recently, but my two favorites are like a matcha latte and a chai tea latte. Those I could drink every single day, and really I kind of rotate between the two on the daily. I'm not going to be one of those people that's out here saying like the health benefits of this, or I drink this for my gut health, or different things. I'm sure there are a ton of benefits that I don't get in the world of that. For me, I just like drinking tea. And it started when I was little because when I was young, I remember when we'd go out to eat or whatever as a family, and my mom would order an iced tea. And I just wanted to be like my mom, who had iced tea unsweetened. And as a result of getting used to drinking tea that was unsweetened as a child, I just kind of followed that path. I don't know. I've never really been a soda guy or carbonation. I don't get into it. So tea was just kind of my safety zone.
Yeah, no, that's funny. I like that. I like that a lot. And you brought up the podcast, and obviously there's a lot of overlap between the Layback Podcast and FlexPro Grip. It seems that way. And this has come up on a number of episodes we've done. To your point, with surgeons, with performance coaches, with entrepreneurs within this performance and rehab space. But we see this epidemic of injuries in baseball right now, and it's almost like the way people are talking, they almost expect it to be a side effect of the sport. Like, hey, if you're a pitcher, you're going to tear your UCL at some point. It's just like the cost of success or whatever. And personally, I just feel like that's absolute bullshit. Like, we shouldn't be settling for injury as part of the game, and you're going to have to get this $50,000 orthopedic surgery that's going to change your life forever. Like, I really think that there's a different way there. And, I think that a lot of people understand the importance of the shoulder, but not as many people understand the importance of the elbow, wrist, and hand and all this forearm musculature in relation to protecting the UCL that way. So why did you decide to focus down here instead of up here in relation to, how we're going to prevent these injuries at the elbow that way?
Much like you said to me earlier, there's so many things that we could go into there. I'm going to try to stick to the question, and maybe I'll touch on some of the periphery as we work through it. But yeah, you talk about the lower arm instead of the shoulder. For years, baseball performance training or baseball rehab was just let's get the shoulder really strong and that'll take care of everything. The greater problem in the baseball world, I think, is we actually have gotten so good at training as a whole, which is why guys are throwing harder than they ever have before. And also, I think it's why we have more guys getting hurt than we ever have before. And the problem with that is we have gotten so good at training everywhere else in the body that we can produce significantly more force. Our movement patterns are better. And as a result, we can throw a ball harder. The problem is that force has to go somewhere as it's working through the body, out through the hand, and into the ball. So, what we have done as an industry, getting really good at shoulders, is we have just pushed the breaking point further down the chain. So then the elbow has become the breaking point. That's just the new weakest link in the system. Then, like, kind of into our backstory a little bit, we ran a sports performance training facility in New Orleans for a while, and everybody who came in to see us, for the most part, either wanted to throw harder, had elbow pain, or a mixture of both. And this was back in the kind of 2016 to 2020 range when I had finished my playing career. But we embarked on this journey to figure out, why are these guys in pain? Why are people blowing out their elbows? What's going on here? Ultimately, when we figured out nobody had a good idea of why people were hurting their elbows or requiring Tommy John, that inspired us to figure it out. And ultimately, that mission to figure it out led us to developing FlexPro Grip. It's not like we embarked on creating FlexPro Grip. We just wanted to figure out why baseball players were hurting their elbows all the time. Now, the reason this is important is we tried to boil it down to eventually what became a simple math equation, which is all this force. Yeah, I know I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. This could get a little wordy or in depth. I'm
Dude, go on.
trying not to be too sciencey. So, our elbow structure as a whole has three things that can handle the torque that throwing places on the elbow when we throw a ball. Our critical instant is maximum layback or maximum shoulder external rotation. Now, it has been proven or shown, whatever word you want to put on it, in cadaveric studies that the UCL can handle roughly 35 Newton meters of torque before it blows. I don't care if people listening don't know what a Newton meter is. This is just kind of like the backstory to get to where we are. Then probably handling another third of this total load that a pitch would put on your elbow is the bony collision on the backside of your elbow. So that would then be your radius and your humerus colliding together. So we have the UCL, or the ulnar collateral ligament, that can handle about a third of the force that a throw would place on the elbow. We have the bony collision on the backside of the elbow that can handle about a third of the force that a throw would put on the elbow. Then we have the muscle tendon units. The muscle tendon units need to pick up the slack that the other two can't. The beauty of the muscle tendon units, this may seem obvious to the audience, but we can train muscle tendon units. We can't train ligament. We can't train the bone. The only way we can get more out of the bone is if there's greater gapping on the medial elbow, just creating a larger collision. So that's not cool. We don't want that. If the muscle tendon units can't do more, it places the onus on the UCL to step up. Now, Dr. Glenn Fleissig, who kind of led baseball biomechanics in the research for the longest time, and he's still doing great stuff for the industry, he has been on record of saying the UCL cannot be our first line of defense. The problem is, in kind of the world of baseball, we treat the UCL as the primary defense of this elbow valgus stress. Now, our mission on our side is to strengthen the important musculature, which is then why we designed FlexPro Grip the way we did, getting back to your original question of why do we focus on the fingers, wrist, and hand, of three muscles: the FDP, which controls fingertip flexion, the FDS, which controls mid finger flexion and the metacarpal joint, and then the FCU, which controls ulnar deviation. Those three muscles are the three muscles best positioned to offload stress from the UCL based on their origination points and the way they run in line with the UCL. If we can strengthen those muscle tendon units, objectively, we can offload stress from the UCL and make the muscle tendon units the number one defense to this elbow valgus stress that we experience in the baseball world.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's like, to your point, I just can't even begin to think about how many athletes that I've worked with where we just test like grip strength, right? Like just see where they're at. And their grip is like significantly weaker than any other part of their body. And it's like, especially in those baseball specific positions, right? Like if you have a grip dynamometer of sorts that way, test it with the typical arm by the side, but then put them in that way, layback position or put them way up overhead and just see how much their grip drops. And it's amazing to me how weak these structures have become because, the way I think about training that way, you kind of need to grip a bar in order to get stronger. You have to grip a bar to bench it or do pull-ups or curls that way. So in theory, I would think our grip would be really, really strong. And there's a number of studies out there detailing the importance of grip strength and the importance of this entire area just from a strength standpoint. And I would imagine while the injury prevention side seems to be the main goal here, and it would certainly be my own personal main goal, preventing the elbow from getting injured, trying to avoid a UCL injury. I'm sure there's a lot of people, you mentioned performance before, that get into this for the performance benefits because, I don't know everything about baseball. I was not a really great pitcher in my own career that way, and like high school ball and that sort of thing. But I would imagine that being able to be really strong at the area that like literally grips the ball and just being able to form all these weird finger positions to even just release the ball can really drastically impact your own pitch ability that way, how the pitch moves or breaks or spins or that sort of thing.
Yes, you're spot on there. And if you don't mind, I'm going to answer that and then kind of backtrack to what you were saying about testing with hand grip dynamometry.
Yeah.
So first addressing the performance point, because we can isolate the fingers. And if you recall me mentioning earlier, this goes beyond just a dynamometer and it's functioning similar to force plates. So we can get beyond finger strength, maximal strength, and also look at rate of force development. What or where that becomes important is beyond just our ability to handle stress at the elbow. If we can increase the rate of force development of the fingers, we can also apply greater force more rapidly to a baseball. Now, that might not mean a lot to a ton of people, but in very simple terms, kind of keeping this high level, that can increase the spin of the baseball as well as the velocity of the baseball. And spin and velocity are kind of the name of the game. Velocity has great predictors of success. If you can throw harder, you're going to be more successful. Now, we don't market the velocity part as much. Like that's way lower on the totem pole for us. As you said, we care most about health, and then performance is this awesome added benefit. But we've seen this really cool side effect of training on FlexPro Grip. And we do have, I say side effect, that's kind of joking because we discovered it more as a side effect. We do have protocols that are specifically designed to help players spin the ball better and beyond just spin it quote unquote better, meaning higher spin, we can tailor them to specific types of spin. So then we can bias a specific finger that might help a guy, baseball term here, but get behind the ball better and backspin the ball more, or maybe bias the middle finger and get some more glove side movement of a pitch, decreasing the spin efficiency, or maybe bias the index finger and maybe try to get some more arm side movement. Now, backing up this, I think based on your audience, I like to believe they could get really into this, and maybe this is our own rabbit hole here, Dan, which I know you will appreciate tremendously. So maybe I'm just talking to you on this one. But the Philadelphia Phillies did this unbelievable study that they released this past summer. I think it came out in July, but they tested guys throughout their entire organization, healthy and unhealthy, meaning elbow or shoulder injury, on hand grip dynamometry. They tracked it throughout their entire, I forget the exact timeline. It was like season, 2 seasons, something like that. And what they found was that there was no difference between the healthy populations and the unhealthy populations of their players in their hand grip dynamometry grip strength. Now, why does this matter? It's not that grip strength doesn't matter. It's that hand grip dynamometry for medial elbow health or for baseball specifically is the wrong tool. And it is the wrong tool because of the positions that you talked about earlier. That closed off, thumb involved position is nowhere close to the loading patterns that we experience in the sport. So, with the thumb involved in normal hand grip dynamometry, then we're incorporating palm and thumb strength, skewing the data, and the closed fist position is not optimal for FDS or FTP activity. And as a result, we are not getting a good picture of how well the musculature of an athlete can protect them from valgus loading.
Right. And not to mention, I would imagine, at least from my own experience, it's very difficult to recreate the same test position for grip strength testing, right? Like if you're holding a dynamometer, odds are that athlete is going to dip into flexion or extension or do something weird with their wrist to try and, squeeze it harder or put out more force. But it's like, how reliable is my number if we're not testing in the same position every time or testing in the same manner each time? And to your point, grip strength is good, but it's also just the gross measure of everything there. I can't get a very individualized assessment from that. And a lot of times, I think we look at the entire horsepower of something. We look at how much force it can put out, but we don't actually take the time to appreciate where that force is actually coming from. Because, we might have 6 horses pulling the carriage here, but 2 of them aren't doing any of the work. And we want to figure out what those 2 are and get them doing something here. And I think that individualization standpoint is really needed to kind of really holistically address this issue from both the performance and the injury side of things that way.
I think your example is perfect regarding the horsepower. That's spot on. And when you look at a horse-drawn carriage, that's all we're trying to do. We're not saying that a hand grip dynamometer is a bad implement or that a traditional grip strength test is bad. It was just the wrong time or the wrong tool for what we were seeking in the baseball world. Now, for upper body force output, great. The hand grip dynamometer gives you a good idea maybe of upper body readiness. You can use it for fatigue testing over time. But when it comes to the important musculature for baseball, it's just not it. And with what we do, because we strip the thumb out of it with FlexPro Grip, we can look at the individual fingers and we can test at different muscle lengths as well as targeting different muscles or optimally targeting different muscles. We get a really good idea of how much each of the most important muscles can provide. So we're just seeing better correlations between FlexPro Grip testing and injury prediction, or those who have already gone through injury and then rehabbing them back with very targeted rehab plans.
Yeah, and to that point as well, it's not just a testing tool, but it's also a training tool, right? And I
Right.
believe a lot of the training that you do with it is isometric in nature, which people joke that that's my middle name now, isometric, but I think that that does such a good job of actually loading these weak spots within the soft tissue itself, but also like working to prevent some of these soft tissue injuries that we see. Plain and simple, you look at the season and I see guys on the injury report all the time, like hamstring strain out a week, quad strain out a week, but those same things can be occurring in the forearm musculature as well. So it's like, we need to make sure we're actually putting enough force and load through those structures. So not only do we avoid the ligamentous injuries, but I also want to avoid any kind of soft tissue injury. And I mean, to your point about the extension, the deviations, and even just the, pronation, supination contribution that it sounds like you guys are working on, like I see this as having applications for other overhead athletes outside of the sport of baseball as well. And I think that term overhead athlete, like you can apply that to volleyball, you can apply it to softball, tennis, pickleball is like the new craze. I'll even go out and say lacrosse. Like I've seen a couple UCL injuries from lacrosse that way, oddly enough. And I think that there's a lot of potential for work there, both for the UCL, but also just some of those other kind of elbow irritant or tendinopathy, soft tissue type injuries that we would see here as well.
Big time. So even just yesterday, I had a meeting with a physical therapist who has a caseload that is specifically gymnasts. And it's not really thought of. This is more the UCL specific, but gymnasts have the second highest rate of UCL injuries once we get beyond baseball. But then we think of the other possible injuries in gymnastics, whether it's going to be pulley injuries of the fingers, whether it's going to be wrist overload. I mean, I'm going to try not to make myself sound too stupid, but pretty much any sport or any activity that involves gripping, FlexPro Grip can have a place within it. And you bring up pickleball. Pickleball now has a higher rate of tennis elbow than tennis does. And then both those sports alone only make up 2 to 5% of total tennis elbow cases. I mean, it's called tennis elbow because the name is way more catchy than lateral epicondylitis. But if you're a tradesman, you're at risk of lateral epicondylitis because of the light gripping and vibrations that you experience. If you use a drill, if you use a hammer, you are a potential victim of lateral epicondylitis, which is just, again, the fancy term for tennis elbow. But yeah, you talk about other sports. So we work now. We have a couple tennis players. We have a couple golfers. We have a small handful of football players at this point, both quarterbacks and linemen as well, or defensive players. It's kind of an unthought of injury, or I didn't think much of it until we got exposed to the sport and FlexPro Grip's applications to it. Granted, this is the incredible ideas of others. We create a tool that we hopefully can get in the hands of very smart people to apply it for their needs. Whether it's fingers getting caught up on a jersey, you think about holding. Holding is a part of football. Yes, it gets called occasionally, probably more than your team may like it to be called, but there's pretty much holding on every single play. So the fingers are stressed enormously. We're not working with jujitsu or judo athletes or any sport that's wearing a gi at this time. But for anybody that's a combat sport athlete, and you think about when a gi is involved and the importance of grip, I mean, that's insane. The forces that these athletes have to withstand, whether it's in landing on a bar or a parallel bar, uneven bar in gymnastics, that grip is insane. Or when it comes to holding somebody else's gi in a combat sport. So it's, yes, we started in the world of baseball, but baseball is just this small little nugget in this massive world that grip and finger dexterity impacts.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you bring that up because I think a lot of the sports that you mentioned, take football for example, the focus is very lower extremity for the majority of things or core for the majority of things. Yes, the upper body plays a role, but I don't see a whole lot of football guys coming to me concerned about their grip strength or, their wrist or hand or that sort of thing that way. But at the end of the day, you're only as strong as your weakest link, and the force has to leave the body somewhere. So if you're throwing a ball, or throwing like, a lacrosse stick or whatever that way, like the force is leaving through your hands. So again, if that's the weak link, unfortunately, we find that weak things have a tendency to break, but it's not just weak things being, force deficits that way, but it's also just this concept of like, I've been obsessed with learning more about the nervous system lately. And basically, if we don't use muscles, our body kind of forgets how to use it. Just motor learning and neuroplasticity. We have to use things in order for our body to, basically keep fresh on them. And if we're not doing it for a while, right, take 3 months off from the squat, your hip mobility might be the same, but I guarantee you your squat is going to suck. And it's not that you lost all of this muscle mass or, completely shrunk away to nothing. It's that your body actually forgot how to do the movement because you haven't done it in a long time. So if we never use or never train our ability to use our forearm and wrist and hand complex that way, then ultimately we're setting ourselves up for failure from both a force standpoint, but also just an actual like motor control standpoint, right? Like I am a huge fan of giving people more options to solve movement problems. Athletes compensate in crazy ways, regardless of what sport they're involved in. And I think the more we expand their movement vocabulary and open up more safe ways for them to solve these movement problems, the better off they're going to be, right? I guarantee you, if you look at, take a baseball pitcher and you do slow motion video of him throwing the same pitch over and over again, there's going to be small, minute differences each time. Slightly different angle here or there. Maybe one, he gets 2 degrees further into layback. I don't know if all of these things matter. I'm not the smartest guy around, but they're different each time, over and over and over again. So we're doing the same thing, but solving it through a different pattern. So the more we can give someone a wider array to solve those kind of movement problems, I think the better they're going to be from both the performance and the injury prevention side of things.
From a general movement prep or performance training perspective, I think the baseball world is doing a much, much better job of training for exactly what you just said. Whether it's differential learning or whatever phrasing you want to put on it, the baseball world in the past year or two has, yes, the world has pretty much gone down the rabbit hole of taking guys away from repeat, 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 and more into the world of we are going to discover, we are going to challenge, we are going to set an external goal, and however the athlete or the pitcher or the hitter can achieve that goal, that's awesome. So then the athlete can develop, much as you said, different movement solutions to solve the problem. In the sport of baseball, is there an optimal? Maybe, but it's probably more the optimal for the individual. So this differential style of learning enables coaches and players to figure out what movements work best for them and then be able to make adjustments along the way. I heard a great thought from the pitching coach at Richmond, Josh Epstein. One of his big things in recruiting is actually seeing pitchers that he is going after throw in different environments. And when he says throw in different environments, he wants to see them on a turf mound, a dirt mound, ideally a well-kept field, a poorly kept field. And his ideas there is he wants to see how athletes can adjust to their surroundings, not only mentally overcome it, but what might change physically in how they solve these problems. Can they still be successful without optimal conditions? I know we're getting beyond the FlexPro grip and isometric stuff, but training, just talking about training is fun. And I
Well,
think the baseball world is doing a much better job of that of late.
I mean, we just talked about that earlier this week with Rob Nelson, right? The ecological component and environmental component, right? It's all about skill acquisition and how we carry that over into performance, right? Like, I guarantee you, if one of your FlexPro customers comes to you and says, "Hey, look, they improved their strength by 10 newtons." Great. What did it do for them on the field? Oh, well, it didn't do anything. Okay, then what did we actually do there? Versus, hey, look, they're X amount stronger, but also, hey, their spin rate improved, their velocity improved, and they feel less apprehensive about injury. Okay, we checked all of our boxes. That's a huge win. We're done for the day. It's all about how we carry things over to sport. It's not as much just, the training element, as much as I would love to make it on the training. It's about the carryover to the sport that way. And I think that the environmental considerations you brought up are a great example of that. But also, with the type of stuff we're talking about, you can train anywhere, right? Like you've probably got people doing their Flex Pro on the freaking airplane, on the field, in the weight room. Same thing with any of these isometric type things, right? Like it's not confined to, oh, you have to train at the gym all the time, period. It's like you can, in theory, train wherever you want to train that way.
Yeah, you are spot on, and I think the point to echo, the biggest takeaway there, yes, the audience doesn't need to hear me reiterate that the beauty of isometrics is you can pretty much do them anywhere. Just with the addition of tools like FlexPro Grip, we just get data behind it and you can make more informed decisions with it. But what you were saying with the environment and giving feedback, if we're doing something and we don't know what we get from it, what's the point? What's the point of going bowling and not seeing the pins? How good would it feel for you to throw a ball, you hear some noise, and you hear someone from behind a curtain yell, "Oh, that was a good one. Try doing it a little more to the right next time." What does that mean? You gain nothing from not seeing the results or understanding how they apply. So the objectivity is incredibly important. And I'm a huge proponent. Maybe it's because I'm a super nerd when it comes to this stuff, but the more you can measure, the better off you're going to be because it's either going to tell you what's important or the silver lining is you are going to know without a doubt that that route that you might have been pursuing is not worth going down if it doesn't impact your performance. So I'm always just going to fall back into what do we know, how can we apply it, and what do we actually gain from it?
What do you feel has been the most unique application that you've seen or heard of the FlexPro Grip in any kind of setting or environment that way?
Okay, I'm going to try to rack my brain really quickly, so it might start with some pretty basic examples
Go
and
for it.
then we'll move on. One of the really cool ones, I think, it's still in the baseball world. This is kind of blending subjective with objective. And obviously, when you play a sport, there is some feel to it. It's not just like you can always say, this swing speed is the perfect swing speed. This throwing velocity is the perfect throwing velocity. There's an art to all the things that we do. And just because like somebody makes more force in a juke than somebody else on the football field, it doesn't mean the more forceful juke or the guy that put his foot in the ground better had a better move than the guy that did it less forcefully. At the end of the day, the sport is played, and whoever has the most points, runs, whatever, wins the game. So there is a feel aspect that goes beyond just the data at some point. So when we take that data and use it more subjectively, or where some athletes have, is beginning to try to quantify feel. I think this application is very cool. And like you were saying about like the neuromuscular training in a way, where we might not have done something before, so we don't have that neural patterning, or we haven't done something in a while. So with the objectivity of FlexPro Grip, we can begin to teach an individual what a certain level of force feels like. Then what we do from there is we can work with an individual and say, without like looking at what your force readout is, get to this level. Okay, now you are applying X number of force on your middle finger, Y number of force on your index finger. Let's flip that ratio. So instead, now let's make it 4-to-1 index to middle, 1-to-4 index to middle, and but keep the same force ceiling. So teaching individuals how to apply differential levels of force. And does that matter from a muscle tendinous perspective of health? Probably not at all. But does it matter from a pitcher being able to grab a ball and manipulate it in a way to get it to move in a desired fashion? Potentially. And that's where stuff gets exciting, because it goes beyond us just saying, like, great, your forces are going up. It means you're getting stronger, which means your tendons are likely getting stiffer if you've done this for a long enough time, which then means you're healthier. That means nothing to the majority of athletes we work with. Let's face it. We love prevention, but it doesn't mean a lot to most people. They care about the other P, performance. So then if we have a guy that comes back to us and says, well, my changeup is moving 2.2 more inches than it ever has before, and it's measured on TrackMan. Now that matters for the athlete, and that's super exciting. And then we on the back end can say, well, this is also good because of all the things I said earlier. Their forces are improving, yada, 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 greater muscle tendon unit stiffness, and now they're healthier.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And even just to your point on the ratios there, like just from an overall biofeedback standpoint and kind of getting in tune with the body and what you're actually doing, I think that that feedback element is really, really nice. And obviously, to your point on the pitch track, anymore, it's in part about how hard you throw, but it's also in part about how much your stuff moves. Like I have never seen some of these breaking balls that I see, in some of these videos online. Like they're perfectly tunneled where the fastball and the breaking ball look identical for about 40 feet. And then all of a sudden it just dives and dips like 2 feet to a certain direction. Like it is absolutely crazy. I don't know how you hit any of these things. But that's just with the level of understanding we have around performance now. I can't wait to see where that is in 3 to 5 years when all of a sudden, like, we're twice as impressive as that.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy. And then you hear people talk about beyond just the tunneling, which makes hitting hard enough when two pitches look the same or a few pitches look the same out of release, and then deviate at some point to home plate. Then you have pitchers that also work on reverse tunneling. So can they land in the same spot by taking the greatest deviated path along the way? And when you think of having to defend more or less against both of those things as a hitter, it makes way more sense of why these guys don't hit like they used to. For old man yells at cloud baseball fan, there's a reason that the batting average across the baseball is below 240 because hitting is damn near impossible when guys are throwing the best stuff they ever have movement wise while also throwing it harder than they ever have before.
Yeah, it's literally insane. And I talk about this all the time, but I cannot wait to see where the performance space goes in the next 5 years because obviously we're cracking the code on a lot of these performance things. But I also think that as we work to keep athletes healthier and in the game longer with their kind of native anatomy and native structures that way, that's only going to help that performance side as well. At the end of the day, I don't know the outcomes for UCL as well as I know for ACL, but I'm willing to bet that anytime you go through a surgery, there's a chance you don't get back to where you were before. So if we can just avoid those entirely, performance should be at a level like we've never seen before.
Big time. And that's a crazy thing in the baseball space. And I don't know how much it happens with ACLs or other sports. Obviously, ACL is less prevalent in baseball, which I'm sure I have led on to this point that the majority of my focus is in that realm and then more with the UCL than anything else. I don't want to say UCL return data has been entirely misrepresented, but I also am okay leading on to that to a certain extent. And what I mean by that is there's some sort of a selection criteria bias. Like for those athletes that do make it back and are successful from a UCL tear, we have their data. So it's like, oh, well, this guy made it back and he pitched and like, look, like this is why people are better after they have Tommy John. Well, no, that guy was just really good. And that's why he's still there. It had nothing to do with his Tommy John. Then on the other side of things, there's incredible research done by Dr. Matt Fury, as well as another article done by Dr. Chris Ahmad. And in the research that these guys have done, they show that although the baseball world or the UCL world markets that athletes are making it back at a 90 to 95% rate from Tommy John surgery or UCL reconstruction, actually returning to prior level of performance, which I would argue matters significantly more to an athlete than just getting back to have that banner, that sticker, that gold star that says congratulations. Actually performing matters way more. And those rates are likely more between 40% and 70%. So a wide range, but that goes to show that half the people that get Tommy John will never be the same player they were prior. And that's not okay. Like, yes, we can continue to get better at the surgery, but we should also probably try to avoid it. And I know you led on to that earlier. It seems like it is just a natural course for a baseball player at this point. You look at the MLB data, and a little under 40%, it's just over 35. I think 36%. So I know I just threw three numbers at everyone. Roughly 36% of all pitchers to throw a pitch in the MLB season this past year have had Tommy John at some point in their career. That's insane. It's just like a rite of passage at this point, which it shouldn't be. So how can we avoid that? And then getting into like the weird philosophical stuff of performance training, is zero injury desired? Yeah, 100%, because that means nobody's getting hurt. But then does that mean we're still pushing the envelope on performance and potential outputs? Maybe not. So like then we could get in the weird discussion of like what would the quote unquote correct injury rate be where we're still kind of pushing the envelope on performance. Now, I'm not going to say that's where we're getting into with FlexPro Grip. Our dream is Tommy John turns into Tommy who just no longer exists. That's the mission. But as an industry, where does that number need to fall for everybody to be okay with it?
Yeah, no, there's a lot to unpack in that world and in that realm. And in reality, we could probably talk about this stuff for another hour and still only really scratch the surface on all that there is to unpack here, Adam. But I know, as you mentioned before, you've got a number of other resources and plenty of other things to continue the conversation that way. So where can people find out more about you at, and where can people find out more about FlexPro Grip at?
Yeah. Okay, so we'll start with the basics. FlexProGrip.com is a great place to just see what we do. We have a bunch of white papers on there. We have articles that we put out. We try to be as forward and open with our research and the data that we have as possible because at the end of the day, we just want the industry to be more knowledgeable about what's going on, and then people can decide how they want to go about making a difference. We think FlexPro Grip is a great tool for that, but if you just want to use our website and our resources to help you learn more, that's awesome too. So then you can email us. You can get me directly at Moreau, that's Amoreau at flexprogrip.com, or maybe easier, since everyone knows how to spell info at flexprogrip.com. You can email either of those to get in touch with us. We're on social media, Instagram and X, the Everything app. Everything's happening on X, i.e. Twitter. But we're at FlexPro Grip on both of those. And if you want to hear some baseball specific stories, check out the Layback Podcast. That's on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube.
Yeah, that's awesome. We'll link to all of that in the description below too. That way, if you didn't quite catch it, you can just click there and see everything that Adam and his team at FlexPro are up to. Adam, this was awesome, man. I really appreciate your time in the conversation.
Thanks a ton, Dan. This was great.